looking a lot more natural these days.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Like
That's the
your
dream.
old self when
Like
you
my old
weren't
self.
yellow.
You're like, what happened? Did he get, what's the thing that
Jaundice.
kids get? Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That was the
Kalen
word.
and his whole YouTube channel got jaundice.
Gotta put you under the blue light.
Yeah. Cool.
We're
We're,
recording now, right?
we're recording now. I can trim up the beginning part and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but yeah, we are recording. We're back in business. I need to get this Google Doc thing opened up. But yeah, all right, man. We finally did it. I guess let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is what podcast this is. I'm playing with
Oh,
the idea of maybe starting something through the new company or I don't know. I don't know. But
this is just content
I
right now.
yeah, it's just content. It's just content. But I don't know how to intro it. It takes a while to get comfortable with the old intro sequence. So I don't know how
Yeah.
to start.
Maybe we can start by I'm actually going to interview you. And Kaylin, could you
Perfect.
introduce yourself? What do you
Yes.
do? Why
Yes.
are we here?
I
Thanks,
can do
Kaylin.
that. I can do that. So I work for a company called ShopPad now, and the product is called Mesa, which is workflow automation, Zapier for Shopify. My boss is going to hate me for describing it that way, but because they're also the competition. But yeah, and I've been diving into Shopify land after having been in Magento for some time, which is where we met. And yeah, so I've been just diving into Shopify the past few months and working on automation, trying to find interesting use cases for automation stuff. And yeah, that's my
That's
deal,
cool.
man. What's yours? Who are you? Introduce yourself to the viewers and the listeners at home.
That's a good question. Who am I? I am still Mark Lewis. I've been Mark Lewis for approximately 35 years.
I realize you were 35. Dude,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you're more mature than me most of the time. And I've got a couple years on you. That's good.
I think we have different strengths and weaknesses.
True. I think so too.
Maturity is not one barometer. Like
True, true.
I have zero children, so I am probably a less mature father than you.
That's probably the case. Yes.
So I have to give you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Mark. I run an e-commerce agency, Calico Commerce, and our specialty is Shopify, Magento, and BigCommerce in that order. We're a full service agency, except for we don't do like growth or PPC. We're really
Mm.
focused on site ops, development, design, keeping your site up and maintained and converting as best as possible. Most of our clients are between 3 to 50, 100 million in revenue. And we're basically like the e-commerce like fractional team for our clients. Usually our clients do have like at least a marketing manager, maybe a design team, and we're interfacing and like filling in the gaps of what they do and don't have internally.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And any recent, so I know topic wise, we want to talk about, oh, I pulled up the entirely wrong. I pulled up a Google Doc with our notes, but then I accidentally pulled up my weekly update to my boss. I was like,
Let's talk about
that's
that, Caitlin.
that's a whole
Let's
different
do
one.
your weekly review.
Yeah, I know we want to talk about headless stuff because that's one of those things. I think you were included in a modern retail article on the topic.
Yeah, Modern Retail kind of did a explainer on composable commerce and
That's right.
trying to suss out the differences between headless and composable, which, as you probably know, they're very interrelated. Composable being a bit more broad term of being like, hey, we're going to take all these different little pieces of parts and put them together and not have
Right.
it's like the opposite of a monolith that we've been used to of like even
Right.
Magento. I was just thinking the other day of we used to develop like reviews apps basically on Magento over and over. Like every client would be like, hey, we want reviews. Well, we just have to do it custom over and over. Now, no one thinks about like when they're saying like, oh, we need reviews on our e-commerce site. Even on Magento, they're not like, oh, let's do reviews ourselves. It's
Mm.
always using some sort of system like a Stamped or a Yotpo. That's like that's composable commerce in a big way of like just basically breaking everything apart.
Yeah.
I think it's like the
That,
microservices stuff.
that my personal struggle with these topics is that I understand them enough big picture to understand them big picture, but I'm not close enough to them to really get into. It just feels like every conversation around headless that I have with the level and composable with the level of detail that I get into them is headless can make sense if you have a very custom need, and if not, then don't do it. And that's
Yeah.
the level at which it makes sense to me. But I'm
Hmm.
sure you get into more detail as you're working with clients on builds and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's been interesting the past, I would say, 2 years because I feel like there's been a push for headless for a while. Like even before the pandemic,
Yeah.
it's been the cool new thing of, oh, you should go headless if you're really like serious about
Yeah.
e-commerce. So even if you didn't have a specific need, it was just
Hmm.
basically, oh, that's the premium option. Like why
Hmm.
don't you buy the Ferrari? There's a lot of reasons, even if you can afford the Ferrari, maybe the Ferrari is a lot of maintenance, a lot of
Yeah.
insurance, a lot of upkeep.
Yeah.
And I think now the market is leveling off a little bit, and people, merchants are starting to more understand like the downsides of going headless. So there's a more measured perspective. And and to that point, like the downsides I would say is the main maintenance of a Ferrari. Like
Hmm.
once if you're using Shopify, once you go headless, so many things don't work out of the box. Like so
Hmm.
many things are custom development. And even probably with Mesa, some integrations probably don't necessarily work because they're relying on some sort of inserting something into the front end. And so it's possible you can still like do everything, but it's way
Hmm.
more work and more development.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm thinking of Glossier was one of the recent sites that launched on Shopify, and
Hmm.
it had a lot of people were talking about it, but I don't know. And they're using stock Shopify, and it was one of those things where for a really high profile brand like Glossier, you would have probably maybe a year or two ago, you would have expected they'd launch headless, or maybe a lot
Exactly.
of people still would expect somebody like them would launch headless. So it was a bit of a surprise that they to certain people. But
Yeah.
then from the perspective you're coming from, it's just like it should be the default option to a choice to go stock unless you have some very specific needs. But people were going crazy on Twitter. I remember just, I guess, from a UX perspective about Glossier, everybody was losing their mind,
Yeah.
and I thought it was cool. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to understand. Like, I'm in a very much in like a learning phase of or like a beginner mind. And so
Hmm.
I'm like not assuming I know everything about everything like I used to. So
Yeah.
I saw it and I was like, oh, cool site. Like I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's for a different demographic than me. So I
Right.
probably should, whatever. But I thought it was cool, but everybody was going nuts about it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is you said like they didn't do headless, and I think that was a big surprise, and especially since Shopify has invested in hydrogen, they've invested in making headless better and more possible, but simultaneously they've really invested in the online store 2.0 experience, and I
Mm,
think they've improved that so much that it's almost come to parity with doing something headless unless you really need to do something custom and integrate some like other custom CMS or something
mm,
else to control the front end. So I do think brands are like realizing, oh, we don't have to go headless. And like you said, like native needs to be the true default, even if you're a billion-dollar brand.
And it's so interesting coming from the Magento perspective where thing and my perception of the Shopify ecosystem having been not super close to it was that
Yeah,
everything's easy with Shopify. It's less custom, it's less work.
yeah,
Things just work. And so it's interesting coming from that perspective and then seeing in some ways like headless is like a reincarnation of Magento in the sense of having to do more custom work, more
Hmm.
maintenance. You're
Yeah.
getting a more of a custom site, which has benefits to it.
Yep.
So not that it's a reincarnation of Magento, but it's the same. It's a similar dynamic. It's a similar trade-off: complexity with customization versus simplicity with less customization. So
Exactly.
it was interesting to see people fighting the similar battle in this other camp.
Yeah. And
Um,
I don't think merchants really knew what they were getting themselves into when they went headless initially, like on
right.
Shopify. We've done a number of migrations from a headless Shopify build to the native theme. And every time we do, the merchants just fall in love with us forever because they're like, wow, you saved us so much money and like
Mhm.
hassle. We were having to email our developer every time we wanted to add a product or do any little
Mhm.
tweak, like just the perspective of going back. Or for them, I think they never had the native experience at all. Just they got on Shopify headless and they were like, this is a lot of work. Like I thought Shopify was supposed to be easier. And they were a little disillusioned. And then they got like the real Shopify experience and they're like, okay, like this is more like what I was promised.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think Dollar Shave Club just recently launched, which was a cool one.
Yep. Also
Um,
not headless.
and also not headless. Yeah, which they've got to be mad. I don't know what their numbers are, but they've got to be gigantic.
They're a little infamous too because I think they were down for at least a week. They had some sort
Okay.
of catastrophic like data data center issue or something like that. Like a couple years ago, I remember
Oh,
basically before they were on Shopify, they had a fully custom system and everything, and then they were just like totally down for it was at least a week.
oh
Um,
wow, that's rough.
I'm sure they're saving a lot of money, and I'm sure like they scaled back their dev team, just having the simplicity of running on Shopify.
Yeah.
But I think once you start out so custom and like you have a big dev team, it's probably a little hard to scale that back.
Mm.
But that's what we've been seeing, especially like now that people are like a little more concerned about the economy or more conservative. They're considering something like Shopify versus like in the past they would probably do like a Salesforce Commerce Cloud or something way more enterprise. They're like, oh, maybe I can make it work. Maybe I can cut costs, not just like platform costs, but like ongoing maintenance and development. If I move to something simpler,
Yeah.
if can I make something simpler like work in my environment?
Yeah. I hadn't really made the connection to the economy, but that's like the headless to native transition happening at a similar time as the economy's getting a crunch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's got to be part of the factor. But yeah, if you're the e-commerce director that made the decision to go headless and it was that Ferrari, you said, "Hey, we have the money, we have a great brand, let's go for the Ferrari," and then you've got a team supporting it to then scale that back and go, "Oh yeah, let's just go with the like off the shelf Shopify." Even if you're getting plus or whatever, and then it's, "Oh, we don't need this in-house talent or they can focus on certain other things." That's got to be a
Yeah.
tough decision to make. And
Yeah.
it's like the simple it's like a it doesn't seem like in some senses in some contexts it doesn't seem like a sophisticated decision. It seems like the sophisticated decision
Yeah.
would be to do the bigger, more complicated thing.
But sometimes simpler is better.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially if you've already done maybe even a round of layoffs at your company and you're like, oh, we just laid off half the dev team. Like, how can we make their lives easier? The
Hmm.
developers that we have left. I think
Hmm.
it makes a lot more sense to start simplifying rather than just trying to like invest in maintaining the Ferrari.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting.
On more of the enterprise macro level, that we have these startups like Fabric and Commerce Tools, which are like
Hmm.
only composable commerce, like they don't have a front end. I'm seeing like they're targeting more of the companies that are using these old big monoliths like IBM WebSphere, and they're saying, "Hey, get off this a slow old monolith that it's so hard to develop on, and use us, and then you can develop like with whatever tools that that you want. But those companies already have a huge dev team, and
Mhm.
basically they're trying to simplify coming from a really complex old system, and then headless is actually simpler than that old system. Whereas Shopify is on the other
Right.
side. It's like it's already simpler, and so if you go headless, you get more complex.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I've never seen WebSphere. I can only imagine. It's fairly enterprisey.
Yeah.
A lot of these bigger systems that have been around for a while. I was talking to somebody on Twitter about NetSuite and how they use it, but that it's not necessarily that smooth to work in.
Yeah.
But
Some of those systems like NetSuite and like even Salesforce Commerce Cloud, I think that they're pushing headless a bit because their front end isn't particularly sophisticated. And honestly, like Magento, I think did a couple years ago when they were pushing like PWAs and headless and PWA Studio. They were pushing
Mhm.
it because the front end theming of Magento was so bad and it was such a pain. It was like, oh, that was the antidote to that. You just abandon the theme altogether and write
Mhm.
headless. So I think
Mhm.
the more complex systems, even Magento to to a point still is okay, headless is the solution to that complexity or like that old front end system. You can just write in whatever you want. You can write in React, Vue. Yeah. Because
But even then, like the Hiva theme picked up a lot of
yeah.
popularity, and I would say amongst the whatever the community is versus there's a certain segment of the community that it's the go-to choice,
Yeah.
and that's just and I think that was a reaction to like you're saying issues with the default theme and also issues with PWA
Mm.
were being super complicated.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
I don't think they got too far in Magento headless world. I haven't run across a ton of Magento 2 sites that are headless, and it does get even more complex. But at least like you could like theoretically separate your front end team. Like really, they could write in React as
mhm,
opposed to learning Magento's theming system, which is pretty
mhm.
complex learn. It's XML and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a different, I think, perceive all the Magento stuff a lot differently now. Like being immersed in Shopify and stuff for a few months. And it's funny because some things are obviously different other things are similar that I didn't
Hmm.
expect to be similar. Like, for example, the whole uptime thing, like
Mm,
where people are concerned about their site going down or being broken, which can mean
yeah.
different things. Like, sometimes that's the core Shopify infrastructure, like a very small sliver of the time, it's the core Shopify infrastructure. And just being
Hmm.
aware of that. So the uptime Shopify app tracks all that. But then there's maybe you broke something in your theme code. Maybe you have apps that are doing something weird, right? So
Yep.
like the anxiety around, is my site down or broken? I've been surprised by how common that is, though it's a completely different thing from with Magento, where like your whole site is just down. It's just
Right.
broken.
Server's down. It doesn't
Server's
load at
down.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been a kind of that's been a surprise.
I
But,
mean,
and then,
with Magento, you could theoretically break the checkout and you could still break it like you can
yeah.
break with Shopify, but there's another level of the server just not being available. But then sometimes it's the worst thing is like the server is available or the site loads, but it doesn't work. You can't get to the checkout because then you don't even have awareness of it. And that's why these apps like Uptime
Right.
time are like helping you test your site. Like that's more important. That's just as important as the server being up. If you can browse and
Right.
not check out, like you're basically closed still.
And also, it's as problems get solved in technology, then you have different problems, but things that would have been smaller issues, like your whole site being down because your servers are broken versus my add to cart button is broken because the developer did something in the JavaScript. You would think the servers down is like by orders of magnitude a bigger problem, but once that's out of the picture and it's not really within your frame of reference, now that add to
Yeah.
cart button is just as bad from
Yeah.
the business person's perspective. It's not working. Like some heads are going to roll one way or another.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. You're just like different problems. There's still problems, but they just shift from the site being available versus like the site just functioning correctly.
Yeah. It's like that hierarchy of what is it? Maslow. It's like
Needs.
Maslow's hierarchy, but
Yep,
like
exactly.
the tech version.
I think we've moved on to better problems of like, all right, can I
Yes.
buy something?
Yes. Yes.
But they don't go away completely.
Yeah. Yeah. And then seeing like I saw a lot of people were really excited about like the Shopify functions,
Hmm.
which allow you. I still don't understand them too well, but every like developer I talk to is like super pumped about them and playing with them. But it seems like they let you, and along with functions, some of the checkout customization features that have launched more recently are
Yeah,
are letting you do more customization in the checkout, which obviously it's taken Shopify a while to get there.
yeah,
And they've had different types of customization options for Plus and people, but they're getting more and more custom. But it's to do that while keeping your core infrastructure rock solid is a very hard thing to do. So that's
yeah.
been interesting to look at. And have you looked at the functions at all? Shopify functions?
Yeah, yeah. It's a little similar to the Shopify script editor that they used to have, or they still have for Shopify Plus, where you can tie into some native functionality. The script editor was written in Ruby, but there's sunsetting that, and there's more functionality in the function editor. And I think to your point, Shopify is slowly opening up like the kimono, and like they've
Right.
had a very walled garden approach, Apple. And I was watching this BlackBerry documentary, which is, or actually it's a drama. It's really interesting, but I forgot that when the iPhone was first released, they didn't have an app store. It was just Apple's apps. And then they had an app
I
store,
didn't
but it
remember
was
that either. Yeah, I didn't remember that either.
very limited APIs and everything. And I think that's what Shopify has been going through of like, all right, we have apps, and how can we open up the checkout? How can we open up the backend functionality? The primary thing is preserving the core stability of the platform. If we compromise that, if we go to the Android model, it's just like the Wild West of you could have viruses on your site, and it gives you more rope to basically break your site versus there is a level of comfort that there's like less ways to break a Shopify site. It's still very
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
We have experience with that. Our clients have experience with breaking their own site as well. But I do sleep way better at night the past couple of years than the first couple of years of working primarily on Magento. Yeah.
Yeah. So
There's less anxiety of what could go wrong.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like you're definitely sleeping easier, and yet there's still is anxiety around some of those things, and it just evolves. But and then the App Store has been interesting to see how people what issues people have with it,
Yep.
and a lot of developers are super not thrilled with a lot of things about the App Store, which
Mhm.
again, I thought everybody in Shopify apps are everybody's happy. Like you don't have code
Mhm.
overlapping like with Magento, like
Yeah.
code level break conflicts. But now it's like you have other types of conflicts between multiple SaaS apps. Maybe it's front end or just are they integrating the way you'd want them to, whatever. And
Yeah.
then there's the issue that there's like too many of them. So everybody
Mhm.
is overloaded with all these apps. And then people are also frustrated about the expense of the apps because SaaS is basically as a whole industry is increasing prices all the time. And so you get apps that do well and they tend to, and then you're paying $750 a month for something and then you've got 15.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting to see some of the dynamics there.
I bet with Mesa, more of those dynamics of there's so many copycat apps for basically everything. So it's how do you stand out in the App Store? I've heard it's very expensive to try to use like their advertising on the App Store. You get like an install and like you pay per install. You pay like $100 or $200 for an install, and then someone will
Mhm.
uninstall it like two minutes later, and it's just like I just paid $200 for a conversion, but it didn't
Yeah.
really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
Oh,
seen people
yeah.
talk about that a lot on Twitter. I haven't dealt with any of our App Store stuff. I have done some searches and I see Mesa come up. So I'm guessing we do
Good.
have some ads running there. I should ask the team about that. But I've seen people post about the like Gil and Gil Greenberg.
I think so.
He's just Gil to me, and Dennis Hegstad, I think too. But yeah, it seems like it's. And then I think a lot of like if you're a newer like last couple years fund like well funded app, a lot of them it seems like they don't really even care that much about the app store. They're going after the plus market or
Yep.
the somewhere towards the higher end of the Shopify market. And like you'll see they'll have one review or two reviews or something, and they're out
Yeah.
here Liquid IV as a customer and a whole bunch of others and stuff like that. And that's the direction that they go.
Yeah. Because I think the App Store serves two functions for those kinds of merchants. It's one, it's a possible install channel, like you could find out about the app. And that's probably not super useful for enterprise level sales. But two, it's just a quick way to be able to install. Like once you've done the due diligence and done the sales process for weeks and weeks on the enterprise
Yeah.
level, it's just okay, now it's very easy for your team to install it. So you
Yeah.
need to be on the App Store, even if you're not like really leveraging like the marketplace
Right.
functionality of people discovering you.
Totally. And then they just recently, I want to say maybe it was Friday, launched the updates to the relevance ranking for reviews in the App Store, which
Yeah.
was interesting. It's pretty
Any
cool.
changes? Yeah.
So I looked at Mesa and actually the top like three were all really good, longer, more
Nice.
meaty reviews.
Nice.
And it had pulled in a couple of older ones because it used to just sort by recency.
Yeah.
But I went in and it pulled in a couple older ones that were, but I looked and I was like, oh, they all look really good actually. But I think one of our other apps, somebody told me had the same problem that other people are seeing, which is some of the things that floats to the top are not super flattering. And in some cases, a couple people said they're floating stuff at the top that doesn't even necessarily look very high quality.
Yeah.
So that that's definitely frustrating if that is happening to you. But I
I
like the
don't,
idea a lot.
yeah. I think they're trying to optimize. I think they are aware it's a problem. And I know they added at some point install time, like how long have you used this app? Months or like seconds, basically. And I'm assuming they're factoring that into the relevance as well. Of someone that's used the app for a couple months is going to have a much more relevant review than one that used it for one day, basically.
Yeah, and then like I saw somebody posting about how customers will do stuff like they'll give you a 1 star and then they're emailing support and they're asking you for some new feature and then they're like, I'll update it to a 5 star if you do the new feature. And I was like, that is so manipulative. And so then I was looking at the rules of what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do with ratings.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a bullet point for this type of thing because this should
Mm.
be like, it should be across the boards that you can't do that. But
Yeah.
then as I was like writing it, I was thinking it through and I went, if to them as a merchant, your app is a 1 star without this new
Mhm.
feature, then that's how they feel. It's a 1 star. Like it's in a way, it is how they feel. You
I
know what I
mean,
mean?
it's well, like,
It's
but
shitty, but
if you buy like an apple and you're like, oh, this doesn't taste like an orange. It's whose
uh,
fault is that? You like, okay, I
yeah,
get if it's like false advertising in the app's description, they say that they're going to do something and they don't. But like
yeah,
sometimes it's just merchants are just angry that it just doesn't read their
yeah,
mind. Like it doesn't do exactly
yeah,
what they want. And it's just like, try another app or I'm
yeah,
sorry, there is no app that exists
yeah,
that does this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're just asking for a brand new feature.
Yeah.
And if you
Hire a
don't give it to
developer.
them, yeah. And I was going, man, that's so crazy that Shopify lets them do that. I would think that
Yeah.
there should be a way to report those. And even if I think the reporting process is just manual currently. I
Really.
think you'd have to email somebody to report a review that breaks the guidelines. But seems like it'd be good to have that option. And what they do with those reports, of course, they could figure that out. But just having the ability to go, come on, man, this is not cool, and then start to categorize the different types of reports seems like it would help. But
Yeah, I'm sure like it's a lot of work. If they're doing it very manually right now.
I think so. Yeah, I think they are.
I like a lot of that is why I haven't really been interested in doing an app. A lot of people ask agencies, "Oh, you could do Shopify apps. Like what? Why don't you just do it?" And I'm like, first off, we have to develop it the first time, which a lot of times we have to do it one off for one merchant, which is fine. But then like those customer service requests, and it's just, if we're charging $10 a month, they send in like one customer service request, and
Yeah.
then the time and money it takes to fulfill that request or just even respond to it is there's all your profit gone. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's brutal.
yeah.
Once you get going and the economics are working out, then it's, hey, man, that's a great business model, but it can be tricky to get there. It seems like you're very much like comfortable with the agency model. Like it's like it's your expertise. You're not trying to do a bunch of different random things. You've
Yeah.
found your sweet spot.
We like dabble in the background with fun projects, but I think in terms of like actual like where the business is going, I think it's smarter to focus on the service side because a lot of apps and partners and everything, they have the opposite problem. Like they're very focused on the product, but they're really bad at services. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of times like synergies between us and partners because they like a Recharge or a Klaviyo, they're like, we want to sell our thing. We don't want to do custom development or we our business isn't really set up to serve customers in that way. And I think it works the other way around as well. We're not set up to provide like productized support to
Hmm.
something because basically we're like a little too expensive. We don't have those layers of like customer service of okay,
Hmm.
like this first tier, second tier, everything would probably just go to the developer immediately, and then it just doesn't make sense time wise.
Yeah, and
I
then yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I have invested in things in the ecosystem, and I think for agency owners it's probably like smarter if you want to be involved in more of the ecosystem and have some
Hmm.
skin in the game, like to invest or something.
Yeah,
But if
yeah,
you try to do it yourself, I've seen a lot of agencies try to do it, and it seems like a huge waste of time.
yeah. Man, my timing is so bad with I haven't done a lot of investing into just like a little bit, but I was just thinking over the weekend about like how bad my timing is with most things. Even with Tesla, I had been a fan of Tesla forever, and then I finally
Yeah.
got one, and like right after I got one, the a Model Y, like the prices went down by 18%.
Oh my gosh. You bought on the way down.
Yeah. And yeah, just and I feel like I'm not bad at seeing a need in the market or
Yeah.
seeing like something and going, oh, that looks like a good thing. But then in terms of pulling the trigger on it at the right
Hmm.
time, horrendous at it.
Yeah.
So I guess you just have to know your strengths and your weaknesses and play to your strengths.
I think timing is everything. When you're
Yeah.
seeing things at an early stage, it's hard to have the confidence to go through with it, but that's probably like
Yes.
the time that you need to start. Otherwise, if
Yeah.
you're just a me too 6 months, 12 months
Yeah.
later, like you're
Yeah.
already behind the people that did
Yeah.
that, have that same idea at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. I think it's like I see the things and then it's easier for me to put my time into doing something related to that
Yeah.
versus putting money in. I end up being too hesitant and then too slow and then I do it at the wrong time, basically.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
investing in general, unless you're just investing in like an index fund, it's probably like a losing game anyway.
right.
If you're doing angel investing or even stock picking,
Yeah,
there's hedge funds that like they get 18% returns or something, and that's like amazing. So if they have
right,
like thousands of employees and quants and PhDs and
right,
everything, and that's
right,
their bar, like I really
right,
don't think that the ordinary person is going to achieve that
right.
gambling.
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw somebody tweet about it and I think they had, I don't know, some large number of angel investments in SaaS and tech, like maybe it was 30 or something. And I think they said that only one has really made any money. And there's somebody, and I forget who it was, but
I
there
think
was
it was
somebody
Dennis.
that's, yes, I think it
Yeah,
was. And like,
yeah.
he's like super plugged in. And so, yeah, I think it's
It's
just,
also a very long horizon of, I think he
yeah,
was talking about the last 2 years, and in angel
okay.
investing, that's so early. Like basically you have to give yourself about 10 years to
Shit.
see how you really did. And
Mm.
10 years later, you've moved on so much probably. So you're really like shooting in the dark and you just see what comes of it.
Yeah, yeah. I talked to this dude, Daniel, and he has an app called Abra, the discounts app. And when I talked to him, before I saw this, it crossed my radar. I was talking to an agency owner buddy of mine, and he was saying that certain things in Shopify are hard to do with discounts, like, I don't know, multiple coupons at a time. He had a couple of things, and I was
Yeah.
surprised. I was like, that doesn't seem like it should be that. I was like, there has to be something out there for that. But he knows that he's looked into it, and he was thinking about building something similar. And then I think Abra handles some of those UK use cases or is planning to, or I don't know. But but this is an example of an app. I see it and I go, yeah, I think this is gonna take off. And the founding team, they were in house with Shopify for a while and stuff, and they seem like they know
That's
what they're
cool.
doing. But yeah, but that I had that thought the other day after talking to him. I was like, yeah, this app is gonna go somewhere, kind of thing. Which
The problem,
sometimes.
go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say the problem is like, as we were just touching on in the App Store, is there's so many apps that do like the same thing. Basically, you
Hmm.
release an app and then someone
Hmm.
clones you. It's hard if your entire business model relies on the App Store
Hmm.
versus like a Klaviyo or I don't know, I'm trying to think of another example, like a Yotpo or Stamp. Like they are on the App Store, but
Hmm.
they're more of there's a SaaS product that's leveraging the App Store for maybe a channel, but more of just like
Hmm.
an easy install. I'm not too like optimistic about individual apps that basically, oh, I it just fixes a Shopify problem. I think other competitors are going to come and compete you to death, or Shopify
Hmm.
just fix it too. Shopify
Hmm.
does support multiple
Yeah.
coupons now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. That was a recent
So
thing, actually, right? Yeah, I
past couple
remember. I
months for
remember.
sure.
Yeah, I remember telling him that, and then I can't remember what the. I can't remember the specifics, but yeah, no, that's the deal. And I think that's why everybody's building out their partnership channels. That's the way to develop a competitive moat versus just the. I think you could almost say that if you're just relying on the App Store, that there probably was a time that it would work, but that time's
Hmm.
probably gone.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those interesting Magento parallels because when I started building my extension for Magento, it was
Hmm.
just after that probably 3, 4 year, 5 year time frame of when you could just launch an extension in the marketplace. What was it called?
Marketplace.
The extension?
Yeah,
Yeah.
marketplace. Yeah.
And there was a whole like generation of people that did that and then it just took off and then I got into the tail end of that and I had to do it in different ways, and so it's probably a similar thing with Shopify. That's why everybody's doing partnership channels and
Yeah.
stuff
The
like that.
What's interesting about the Magento marketplace is what I actually feel like it never really took off in the same way of the Shopify marketplace, where plenty of extension providers like just opted out of it. Maybe they would list it, but like it wasn't, I don't think it's been like the main source of sales for a lot of Magento extensions and integrations. And I think probably it's just a bit of a numbers game. Like I don't think
Mm.
that there was enough like merchant traffic to the marketplace where it made sense for extension vendors to really focus on marketing their apps there, because also I think they probably lose a cut. So it's like, all right, maybe we optimize our SEO so that when people
Yeah.
Google this problem on Magento, they go to our website versus competing with our marketplace listing.
Yeah. And then of course with Magento you didn't have to go through the marketplace because it's open source. You could do it
Yeah.
separately.
And they really never solved the quality problem too. Like it theoretically should have been like a stamp of quality if you're approved on the marketplace. But my opinion is that there was really no difference. If I didn't trust an extension on the marketplace any more than just getting it straight from the merchant.
Sure, but would you say that the same exists in with the Shopify App Store? Like you don't trust something
Oh,
just for being there?
that's a good question. I think at least it has more like volume in terms of like reviews. So you
Mm,
have more data points of, okay, there's 30 reviews that are positive. But the
mm,
Magento marketplace didn't really have the volume of reviews to be able
right.
to make that assessment. And I
Yeah.
do think that Shopify does keep a pretty close eye on the quality. Like I've heard that the App Store approval process is actually pretty hard. Like it's a bit of a pain
That's true.
sometimes to get
That's true.
through. So it's a
Yeah.
high bar.
Yeah, that's true. And that's another complaint you hear about is that it can be difficult or it can be like random. Like the what you may have to do to get approval is could depending on who's reviewing, which individual is dealing with it could be different.
Yeah.
Your mileage can vary and then that could be frustrating, but I
Yeah.
haven't had to
Back
deal
in
with yeah.
back in the day, I've done some iOS apps, and it was the same way with Apple. Sometimes you could submit something, and it was like, all right, got through. Sometimes like a random reviewer would just flag something random. And it's, this was in the last version, and the last
Hmm.
reviewer didn't care about it.
Right.
Why are you bringing it up now? That
Right.
was always like anxiety producing of submitting a new
Yeah.
version to the Apple App Store.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Haven't had to deal with that too much, so fingers crossed.
You're more of an Android man. So are you going to get the Vision Pro though, or the Oculus?
The Vision, man. I have an Oculus. That's only $300, but I haven't used
Yeah.
it much. I got it and I did some of the exercise apps, which are surprisingly good. There's this boxing one, where you're like these things are coming at you and punching them. It get gross because you get real like sweaty, which is the point of it. But you'd
Yeah,
really
you're
get like a decent workout, but then everything
yeah.
just gets like nasty. And so, yeah, but as things get better, man, it's going to be pretty cool. But the Vision
Yeah.
Pro, dude, that thing looks super interesting, man. The price tag
Yeah.
is quite a bit higher. But
Yeah.
I saw you tweet about it, and I was like, oh, dang, he got one. But then I realized you were probably just joking.
I will get one as soon as it release it, but
Nice.
I I do think it's actually going to be pretty significant. Even though it's priced even more expensive than a computer.
Right.
Theoretically, you could replace like your MacBook with it
Yeah.
because it's supposed to have the apps and it's
Yeah.
designed to be your monitor, your computer.
Yeah.
And then I think as opposed to the Oculus tried to create a product that like it was at a price point that people would actually buy, like in
Right.
Apple's, we need to create the best version and then
Yeah.
we'll see where the price is and then
Yeah.
we'll just
Yeah.
convince people it's worth it.
It's inelastic demand for Apple products. But
Exactly.
yeah, dude, I like there's going to be a point where it's going to be possible to work. And then
Yeah.
eventually where you'll be able to spend most of your day in VR. So it's just a question of like when that's going to happen, but there'll be a tipping point. This might be it. And that's pretty huge. I tried one of the like computer screen mirror things in Oculus, but it was
Hmm.
just horrible. It was pixelated and
Yeah.
but yeah, to the point where they really get the sweet spot of comfort and resolution and stuff to where you can work in there,
Yeah.
man. That's going to be
Hmm.
so cool.
I
I
have a
think I
feeling,
heard, yeah,
okay.
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a feeling they've done some testing and they've brought the displays so like to high level that like they probably solved the problem of like fatigue. I think that's a problem
Mm,
with a lot of displays. Like the Oculus
mm,
is like it's low enough quality that you can't use it for a while. But my
yeah,
feeling is that Apple's figured that out basically.
probably. At 3,500, they better have, man.
Yeah.
They better have.
If I only use it an hour a day, I'm not sure if it's worth it.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I heard Zuckerberg on a podcast talk about how they do their meetings, their dog fooding, the meetings app.
Mhm.
And it's like, you can have like side convers like you're like if you're doing a meeting, you're in a room and you can have a side conversation with the person to the side of you, which is like a very natural thing that would happen in a real meeting. Like you would say little comments
Yeah.
and just some of the other like subtle things that you would be able to do.
Hmm.
And I want to try to find a way to do that, like with work meetings, because I
Yeah.
think there's something there. Zoom calls are like everybody's sick of Zoom calls, but I think it'll get better with VR at some point.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
still like a bit of a ways off, but I think this is like a step in the right direction and technology gets cheaper and better over time. So even though like it's super expensive, the Apple version is super expensive now, I anticipate that's because it's just the first version. Over time, this is the Pro, and then they'll have the regular version. They had the
Yeah.
iPad Pro, iPad Air. It's a
Yeah.
little confusing
Yeah.
with the old versions. And I
Yeah.
think they'll have different price points of this, but they needed to go all the way first.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they probably just had to, it must have been so hard to cross some of the thresholds of comfort and fatigue and all that kind of stuff because yeah, like the Oculus, it's like amazing. It's definitely, you're like, wow, I've never experienced this kind of a visual before, but then it's just still, it's uncomfortable after a certain point.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I
Was
think we mostly covered it. We haven't talked too much
yeah.
about airplane Wi-Fi, but
Okay. I don't think
we can
that's super
save that
relevant.
for
Yeah. That's a just
we,
a personal gripe. Like a first world problem, Mark world problems.
why can't they tell you if you have Wi-Fi or not? That's all we
I'm
want to know.
gonna maybe I need to start an app like a flight searcher that will very much highlight that ability or not.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, man. This is fun, dude. Thanks for joining. And now I got to figure out how to end this thing. I'll just crop it off at some point.